The sky over Manila drizzled a fine rain that Sunday afternoon as Manny Pacquiao gazed at the city through the window of his luxurious SUV. Modern skyscrapers contrasted with the humbler areas, reminding him of his own origins in General Santos City. At 46, the former boxer and politician had achieved more than he had ever dreamed. 8 world titles in different weight categories, a respectable political career, and considerable wealth. But in that moment, something weighed on his heart, a nostalgia that not even his bodyguards and assistants could dispel. Deciding to deviate from the official schedule, Manny asked his driver to detour through an old neighborhood he used to frequent before fame. He wanted to feel the pulse of real life again, away from cameras and political formalities. The security team protested but yielded upon seeing his determination. Wearing simple clothes and a discreet cap, he blended somewhat better into the crowd, though his face remained recognizable to many Filipinos. The narrow streets of Tondo, one of Manila's poorest neighborhoods, awakened in Manny memories of his childhood marked by scarcity. Entire families lived in small spaces, children ran barefoot, and the smell of home cooking permeated the humid air. It was a reality far from his current life, yet paradoxically familiar, as if a part of him had never really left that place. Curious glances from residents followed his steps, some timidly waving as they recognized him. On the corner of Dagupan Street, a scene caught his attention. A frail-looking elderly man, appearing to be around 70, sitting on the sidewalk with 2 children. The man was extending a small plastic container to passers-by, while the children, a boy of approximately 7 and a slightly younger girl, huddled against the cold rain under an improvised tarp. There was something familiar about that face marked by time and hardship, something that made Manny stop in his tracks. As he approached, recognition hit him like an unexpected blow. It was Rizal Motapang, his former neighbor from General Santos City, with whom he had shared difficult moments in his youth. Rizal had been a fisherman, always helping the Pacquiao family with fresh fish in times when even the basics weren't guaranteed. The man who now begged had been, in other times, an example of hard work and generosity for young Manny. Seeing that proud man reduced to begging with 2 small children awoke in Manny an emotion he hadn't felt in a long time. Manny observed Rizal for a few minutes, noting the slumped shoulders and calloused hands that once pulled heavy nets from the sea. The children, even in their precarious condition, maintained a silent dignity, their large expressive eyes reflecting a premature maturity born of adversity. The boy, who strongly resembled Rizal, protected his younger sister with an arm around her fragile shoulders. The scene seemed to freeze time, transporting Manny back to his own days of need. The crowd around them began to notice the celebrity's presence, whispers and pointing threatening to create a gathering. Sensing this, Manny discreetly signaled to his closest security guard, indicating he needed privacy for this interaction. Years of experience with fame had taught him to create small moments of authenticity amid the chaos of public attention. With a subtle gesture, he managed to have his team keep their distance, forming an invisible perimeter. The former boxer approached Rizal without identifying himself, crouching down like any other compassionate passerby. He noticed the worn clothes and the lost look in his old neighbor's eyes, who didn't seem to recognize him initially. Manny placed a generous amount in the plastic container, causing visible surprise on Rizal's aged face. The children looked at the benevolent stranger with a mixture of gratitude and suspicion, reflecting a life where kindness rarely came without conditions. In that moment, something in Rizal's gaze changed, as if layers of time and suffering momentarily dissipated. His eyes widened in recognition, studying the face of the man crouched before him. Realization came slowly, a wave of emotion transforming his tired features. Without words, just with a trembling lip and tears forming in the corners of his eyes, Rizal recognized the boy who had grown to become the pride of the Philippines. The rain seemed to intensify at that moment, as if the sky also participated in the emotion of that unexpected reunion. Passers-by hurried by, oblivious to the silent drama unfolding on the wet sidewalk. To the world, it was just another day in Manila. For Manny and Rizal, it was a moment where past and present collided, revealing the strange path fate had traced for both of them. Recognition completely transformed Rizal's countenance, as if a light long extinguished began to shine again in his eyes. He tried to stand quickly to show respect, a cultural reflex deeply rooted in Filipino society, but his weakened legs betrayed his intent. Manny gently stopped him with a gesture, preserving the older man's dignity. The children, perceiving the change in atmosphere, observed the scene with evident curiosity, not comprehending the magnitude of the encounter. In a few whispered words, Rizal explained that these were his grandchildren, 6-year-old Omihon and 8-year-old Bioni. The children's parents, Rizal's son and daughter-in-law, had died in a boat accident during a storm the previous year, leaving the little ones in his care. Life, which was already difficult for an elderly fisherman with deteriorating health, had become almost impossible with the additional responsibility. The house in General Santos had been lost to debts, forcing them to migrate to Manila in search of an opportunity that never materialized. As he listened to the story, Manny felt a whirlwind of emotions. He remembered the days when Rizal would arrive from the sea and set aside some fish especially for his family, even when the catch had been scarce. He recalled how the fisherman often told stories about the ocean to the neighborhood children, teaching them about courage and perseverance. The man who now begged had been, in other times, a pillar of strength in his community, respected by all for his honesty and hard work. The crowd around them began to grow, the recognition of Manny spreading like wildfire. Cell phones pointed in their direction, enthusiastic comments rising above the noise of the rain. Sensing the situation, Manny made a quick decision. He could not leave Rizal and the children in those conditions, exposed not only to the elements but now also to the public curiosity intensified by his presence. With a discreet gesture, he called his personal assistant, Joaquin, who immediately understood the situation and approached with professional efficiency. In a matter of minutes, Manny was helping Rizal to his feet, while Joaquin organized the transport of the family's few possessions. The children, initially apprehensive, were calmed with gentle words and the promise of a warm meal. Manny's SUV, a symbol of his current status, became in that moment a rescue vehicle. As the small group moved away from the sidewalk that had been their temporary home, curious glances and camera flashes followed them, recording a moment that would soon spread across social media. World champion Manny Pacquiao rescuing a homeless family during a rainy afternoon in Manila. The luxurious interior of the SUV created a surreal contrast with the worn appearance of Rizal and his grandchildren. The children, Omihon and Bioni, timidly touched the soft leather of the seats, their wide eyes reflecting astonishment at the unexpected comfort. Rizal remained silent, his gaze alternating between gratitude and shame, dignity struggling against the need to accept help. Manny, sensing the discomfort, maintained a casual conversation about the old days in General Santos, avoiding mention of the evident contrast between their life trajectories. As the vehicle traversed Manila's congested streets, Manny made a quick call, arranging temporary accommodations at a discreet hotel in the Maylake district. He didn't want to expose Rizal and the children to the media attention that would certainly follow if they were taken directly to his residence. The plan was to provide them with a few days of rest and recovery, while he considered more permanent ways to help them. Joaquin, efficient as always, had already arranged for new clothes, toiletries, and a complete meal to be waiting at the hotel. Upon arriving at the hotel, discreet staff guided the group through a side entrance, preserving their privacy. The suite, modest by Manny's standards but luxurious for Rizal and the children, contained 2 comfortable bedrooms, a small living room, and a bathroom equipped with amenities that the children explored with innocent fascination. Omihon couldn't take her eyes off the bathtub, while Bioni examined the air conditioning controls with curiosity, wonders that had existed only in stories for them. While the children explored the room with cautious enthusiasm, Manny and Rizal sat in the small living area. The fisherman, now more composed after the initial shock of the reunion, shared the details of his personal tragedy. His son, Datu, had followed in his footsteps as a fisherman, marrying young Tulihana, a local school teacher. The couple worked tirelessly to provide a better life for Omihan and Bayani, until an unexpected storm during a fishing expedition claimed not only Datu, but also Lihana, who had exceptionally accompanied him on that fateful day. The story hung in the air like a dense cloud, laden with loss and despair. Manny listened in respectful silence, remembering his own struggle against poverty and the countless times when fate could have chosen a different path for him. For a moment, he felt the weight of his fortune, not as a burden, but as a responsibility. There, sitting before Rizal, he understood that perhaps the true purpose of his wealth and influence was precisely this: the ability to intervene when fate had been too cruel to good people. After ensuring that Rizal and the children were comfortably settled, Manny returned to his residence, his mind filled with memories and plans. The mansion in Forbes Park, with its spacious halls and meticulously maintained gardens, seemed strangely empty that night. Sitting in his private office, among boxing trophies and photos with world leaders, the contrast between his current life and Rizal's condition became painfully evident. His wife, Jean Key, sensing his restlessness, approached silently, offering support without questions. In the following hours, Manny shared with Jean Key the story of Rizal, describing how that man had been a constant and beneficial presence in his formative years. He recalled how the fisherman often spoke about the importance of education, despite having himself completed only elementary school. It was these conversations, along with the unwavering support of his mother, that kept Manny focused on his dreams during the hardest times. Jean Key, always sensitive to stories of her husband's humble past, immediately understood the importance of this unexpected encounter. The next morning, as Manila awakened to another busy day, Manny had already made several decisions. First, he tasked his legal team with verifying the children's legal situation, ensuring that any future assistance would comply with custody laws. Then, he instructed his personal physician to discreetly visit the hotel to assess the health of Rizal and the children, suspecting that years of deprivation had left invisible marks that needed attention. Finally, he began exploring options for a permanent housing arrangement, something that would provide stability without creating dependency. Dr. Santos, after examining the family, confirmed Manny's suspicions. Rizal suffered from untreated hypertension and advanced arthritis, consequences of decades of demanding physical work and inadequate medical care. Bayani showed signs of mild malnutrition, and Omihan was fighting a chronic respiratory infection, aggravated by living conditions on the streets. The doctor prescribed immediate treatments and recommended continuous follow-up, especially for Rizal, whose condition required specialized care. Meanwhile, social media buzzed with images of the street encounter. Speculations about the identity of the rescued family and Manny's motives multiplied exponentially. Some media outlets tried to locate the hotel where they were staying, forcing Joaquin to strengthen security measures. Manny, accustomed to public attention, knew that media interest would eventually diminish, but he also recognized the potential of using this temporary visibility for a greater purpose. After consulting Rizal and obtaining his permission, he decided to share parts of the story, not as a gesture of public charity, but as an opportunity to highlight the challenges faced by many Filipino families after natural disasters. 2 weeks passed, during which the transformation in Rizal and the children became visible. With proper nutrition, medical care, and the security of a roof over their heads, their bodies and spirits began to recover. Bayani, revealing a sharp intelligence, devoured the children's books that Jean Key had brought, while Omihan, her respiratory infection finally under control, began to show a natural talent for drawing. Rizal, though still limited by arthritis, gradually regained his upright posture and the sparkle in his eyes, characteristics that Manny remembered well from his youth. During this period, Manny visited them daily, often bringing his own children to meet Bayani and Omihan. The children, initially separated by an abyss of life experiences, soon found common ground in simple games and shared stories. Watching them play together brought Manny a deep satisfaction, tangible proof that external circumstances, however defining they might seem, did not determine a person's essence. In Biryani, with his insatiable curiosity, and in Omihon, with her resilient creativity, he saw reflections of his own childhood and possibilities that were almost denied to himself. The search for a permanent housing solution for Rizal and the children culminated in the purchase of a modest but comfortable house in a safe neighborhood of Quezon City. The property, close to good schools and medical centers, offered the balance that Manny sought: dignity and independence for Rizal, along with educational opportunities for Biryani and Omihon. The house was deeded in Rizal's name, a gesture that the fisherman received with silent tears of gratitude. It wasn't charity, Manny insisted, but the payment of an old debt for all the times Rizal had shared his catch with the Pacquiao family in times of need. Beyond the house, Manny established an educational fund to ensure that Biryani and Omihon could study up to the university level if they so desired. Aware of Rizal's physical limitations for work, he also arranged a small business for him, a fishing supply store in a local market, where his decades of knowledge of the sea would be valued. It was an arrangement that allowed Rizal to maintain his dignity through work, adapted to his current capabilities, while generating sufficient income for the family's daily needs. Moving day to the new house brought a mixture of emotions. Omihon and Biryani ran from room to room, marveling at the space they could now call home. Rizal walked slowly through the rooms, touching the walls as if trying to convince himself of the reality of his new situation. In the small kitchen, silent tears fell as he imagined his son and daughter-in-law, who would never know this comfort. Manny, observing from a distance, understood the bittersweet weight of that moment, the joy of new opportunity inseparable from the pain of the losses that had led them there. The following months brought a stable routine for Rizal and his grandchildren. Biryani and Omihon quickly adapted to their new school, where their life history was known only to the principals, allowing them to experience the normalcy that children their age deserved. Rizal, though still fighting against physical limitations, found renewed purpose managing his small fishing supply store, where local fishermen frequently sought not only equipment but also his experienced advice on maritime conditions and fish behavior. The relationship between Manny and Rizal's family evolved into something deeper than simple philanthropy. Regular visits created genuine bonds between the families, with Jean Key developing a special affection for Omihon, whose artistic talent flourished under proper tutoring. Manny's children found in Biryani a friend who offered different perspectives on life, while Manny himself rediscovered, through conversations with Rizal, simple values that the intensity of his career sometimes obscured. It was an exchange that benefited both sides, gradually dissolving the initial dynamic of benefactor and beneficiary. On a particularly significant afternoon, 6 months after the initial encounter, Rizal invited Manny for a simple fishing trip in waters near Manila. It was the first time the elderly fisherman had returned to the sea since the tragedy that claimed his son, an important step in his healing process. In the early morning hours, in a small rented boat, the two men navigated in contemplative silence, observing the sunrise over the waters. In that elemental environment, status distinctions dissolved. They were just two men from General Santos City, connected by shared memories and mutual respect. While fishing, Rizal shared stories about Datu and Lihana, speaking not with the raw pain of the first months, but with the melancholic acceptance that eventually follows great losses. He described how his son had inherited not only his profession but also his values, and how Lihana complemented the family with her intelligence and dedication to teaching. Through these stories, Manny came to know better the parents of Biryani and Omihon, understanding the heritage of character that the children carried. It was a rare privilege, he realized, to witness this vulnerability of Rizal, this sharing of precious memories that helped keep the absent ones alive. As they returned to the port, with a few fish and hours of meaningful conversation, something had subtly changed between them. Gratitude remained present, but balanced by a sense of equality that can only exist when people recognize the essential humanity in each other beyond external circumstances. Manny, who had begun this journey motivated by memories of past kindnesses, now found himself equally benefited by Rizal's simple but profound wisdom. That day at sea marked a transition, from a rescue story to a narrative of genuine friendship, restored through the unexpected twists of fate. A full year had passed since the rainy encounter in Manila. In Rizal's house in Quezon City, a small celebration gathered the two families to commemorate Amihan's birthday. The girl, now 7 years old, almost unrecognizable from the fragile child found on the sidewalk, was excitedly blowing out the candles on her cake, while adults and children applauded. Her healthy face and confident smile were silent testimonies to childhood resilience, to the capacity to flourish when adverse circumstances are replaced by stability and affection. Bayani, about to turn 9, proudly displayed his recent school certificates to the guests. The boy had revealed himself to be an exceptional student, with particular talent for mathematics and sciences. His teachers, impressed with his dedication, had already suggested special programs to further develop his potential. For Manny, who observed the scene with discreet satisfaction, these successes represented the true essence of his intervention, not just alleviating immediate needs, but unlocking possibilities that would remain dormant under the weight of poverty. Rizal, whose health had stabilized under adequate medical care, moved about the house with the restored dignity of a patriarch. His fishing supply store was modestly prospering, providing not only financial sustenance but also purpose and connection with the community. In occasional conversations, he mentioned plans to expand the business to include a small educational program about sustainable fishing practices, a way to honor his son's memory while contributing to preserve the ocean that had sustained generations of his family. On that festive afternoon, as children played in the small garden and adults conversed on the porch, Manny found a moment for silent reflection. The path that had led him from a hungry boy in General Santos City to a national icon and considerable fortune had been extraordinary by any measure. But in that moment, observing the simple happiness flourishing around him, he understood that his greatest achievement perhaps lay not in world titles or political influence, but in the ability to make a tangible difference in the lives of specific people. The story of his reunion with Rizal had, inevitably, reached the press, initially generating a wave of public attention. Manny, protecting the family's privacy while recognizing the inspiring potential of the narrative, had allowed limited coverage, focused not on his generosity, but on the broader issues highlighted by the case: the vulnerability of families after natural disasters, the insufficiency of social safety nets, the importance of strong communities. The result was an expanded awareness that benefited other families in similar situations, a multiplier effect that transcended Rizal's individual case. As the party ended and families said goodbye with promises of new gatherings, Rizal took Manny by the arm, leading him to a quiet corner of the house. There, with a voice choked with emotion, the elderly fisherman expressed not only gratitude, but an observation that deeply touched the former boxer: that in all his decades at sea, Rizal had learned that the greatest storms often preceded the clearest days, and that a person's true character was revealed not in how they faced success, but in how they responded to suffering, their own and others. In that simple exchange, without grandiose gestures or public declarations, lay the essence of a story that transcended particular circumstances: the mutual recognition of shared humanity, the continuity of kindness through generations, and the capacity of the human spirit to find renewal even after the most devastating losses. If you enjoyed this story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos.